Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate and a special two-party interview with a man many consider could be a kingmaker on May the 16th, the General Secretary of the Communist Party Marxist Prakash Karat. Tomorrow on CNBC TV 18, I shall talk to him about the serious foreign policy challenges India faces and how they should be tackled. But first today, the electoral prospects of the four left parties and the economic crisis facing the country. Mr. Karat, we're almost at the end of this election, so let's start with the electoral prospects of the four left parties. In 2004, you won a record 60 seats. Can you accept that this time round you cannot win as many?
Well, I can't give a number, but we are confident we'll do well this time also.
But you're accepting that you will win less than 60?
Well, 60 was the highest we have got, and we're trying hard to maintain that.
So 50, 40, any idea where it will be?
No, I think both in Bengal and Kerala we are going to get a clear majority of the seats. So I don't really see our number really going down much.
Not going down much, so you could be at 55?
I can't say, we have not made that sort of calculations yet.
Let's come to the third front. Because even if you end up at 55 for the four left parties, you're still at least 5 below that figure of 60 from last time around. So can you accept that the third front won't win as many seats as either the UPA or the NDA?
No, I think the third front is going to do well, and if you take into account the BSP also, which is also fighting separately, but they'll come with us together, I think we will be doing pretty well. I think we'll match the Congress or the BJP easily.
In other words, you're actually saying to me the third front could be the second out of the three?
No, we may be number one, because don't forget that the UPA is practically ceased to exist. So we are talking about Congress with very few allies.
So you're actually saying to me today, with just one round of voting left, that the third front could be the number one formation?
I think the struggle is between the Congress and the remaining allies that it has and the non-Congress, non-BJP parties.
Which means you've written off the BJP then?
I think the BJP is not going to be in the reckoning.
The problem is that whether you're first, second or third, can you accept that your hope of forming a third front government critically depends upon bringing new parties into the third front alliance?
Yes, I think that after the elections, some of the non-Congress secular parties will have to decide on the question of aligning with the new combination.
And if you in the third front are going to form a government, they have to come to you, because if they don't come to you, you can't form a government.
Well, that's true, but it's also very clear now nobody can form a government without the third front's involvement or support.
But the problem the third front faces is that for every Samajwadi that comes to you, you could lose Mayawati. For every Lalu and Paswan who comes to you, you won't get Nitish. What I'm saying is that you can only gain allies by losing allies.
No, we are not looking at such allies. We are not thinking of Samajwadi Party. They are with the Congress. I don't expect them to come to us.
But then who are you looking at?
We are looking at JDU, we are looking at NCP and such parties.
JDU, you really believe will sacrifice its government in Bihar by breaking with the BJP to come to you?
No, I think in the post-election situation there is going to be a realignment, and I'm saying it will be for them to decide, but we hope that they will take that decision.
What can you offer Nitish Kumar to compensate for the fact that if he breaks with the BJP, he will undoubtedly lose his government in Patna?
I think that the Nitish Kumar has carved out a very strong position in Bihar, and independently today he is the major force.
But that
so he can strike out, I think.
He may
take the plunge.
Out, but what can you offer
just
him?
Like Naveen Patnaik has done.
But what can you offer him? What
no,
can you tempt
we
him
didn't
with?
offer anything to Naveen Patnaik. We couldn't offer anything, but I think he will emerge as the major force in Bihar, and he could go ahead without depending on the BJP or any other party.
In other words, he'll do this of his own volition.
I think it will be in his interest, yes.
Buddhadev Bhattacharya has said today that the third front and the left parties in particular are already in touch with Nitish Kumar. Can you confirm that?
With the JDU, yes.
Not Nitish Kumar, but the JDU?
No, we are talking about the JDU leadership. There may be individual leaders who are talking, but we have been talking to the JDU, saying that, you know, they have a significant role to play after the election.
Is Nitish Kumar in the loop of these talks? Or is
no, I cannot say whether we are talking to him. I think all this will happen only after the elections.
Let me put this to you. No matter how many people like Nitish Kumar and the NCP you bring in, if you don't have a sufficient number of 272, then you're still dependent on either Congress or the BJP. The third front, without one of those two, simply won't have the numbers.
Nobody else will have the numbers.
That may be so, but can you accept that the third front will need either BJP support or Congress support?
No, I've said this earlier on your program, that it will be for the Congress to take a decision whether they facilitate the formation of a secular government at the centre.
Which of the two would you prefer to be supported by, BJP or Congress?
No, there's no question of us taking the support of the BJP.
So you're prepared to take Congress support, but no question of taking BJP support?
Well, I'm saying it will be for the Congress to decide when they cannot form a government with the numbers that they have, and the allies, they have very undependable allies.
That I understand, but you said something very important a moment ago, that there's no question of your taking BJP support.
No, we don't. We're very clear. We want non-Congress secular government.
Right. But if you fall short on your own,
we can't have a secular government supported by the BJP.
So the only party that you can take support from is Congress, which means that actually in one...
No, I've said there are other non-Congress secular parties also.
Let me put it like this. If we end up, as many people predict, with a very finely hung parliament, where regardless of the number of people who may be prepared to come across to you, the third front simply hasn't got the numbers, then in that situation, and that's not such a hypothetical situation any longer, would you be prepared to support the UPA or the NDA, or would you force another election on the country?
All I can say is that we are working seriously for a non-Congress government at the centre. And if that is not going to happen, then we will discuss after the elections what we should do.
Which means that you're prepared to countenance another election?
No, but I'm saying one thing very clearly, that it's not the left which is going to take a decision isolated from its allies. Whatever decision we take will be the Biju Janata Dal, the Telugu Desam, the AIDMK, General Secular, all of us together will take a decision.
In which case, it may be possible that your allies, who may not want another election, could actually pressurize the CPM and maybe the left parties as a whole to in fact support in some way a Congress government so that the BJP doesn't come to power.
I don't think the allies we have will take that position.
Let me put it simply like this. What worries many people is that as they hear Prakash Karat repeatedly say Congress is living in a fool's paradise, Congress mustn't dream that they'll get our support, that what he's doing is by default he's accepting, even supporting the prospects of an LK Advani prime ministership.
I don't think the BJP is going to be in the picture at all. And the Congress party, if they go on asking the left for support, I'm telling the Congress that you have to deal with this combination of 10, 11 parties.
Quite right, and the decision will be taken by the combination, not by CPM or the left on their own.
Alone, yes.
Right?
Yes.
In which case, if the 7 parties, who are at least 3 more than the 4 left, were to decide that they don't want a second election, and they don't want to see the NDA and the BJP come to power, then they may choose to support Congress. Will you go with that majority, or will you break with them?
Yes, we will go with whatever this combination decides. And we are confident this combination will remain steadfast in having a non-Congress government at the centre.
Let me put this to you. If it were to come to a situation where there is just a handful of seats separating the BJP and the Congress, would you then be prepared to support a Congress-led government to keep the BJP and everything that you believe it stands for, which you hate, out of power?
No, what is going to happen is, as I said, the UPA is already in the process of disintegration, and the allies that the Congress has now are so undependable, like the Trinamool Congress in Bengal. As you know, the record has been of going with the BJP. The Congress will find itself totally isolated, and then they'll have to consider an alternative secular government.
Let me repeat this question in a different form. Could you do for Congress what you did for the United Front in the 90s? In other words, support a UPA government where Congress is in the UPA, possibly in the UPA steering committee or its equivalent, but not in government. Could you support that?
No, I'm saying that situation will be a reverse. That is, in 2009, the Congress will have to consider the prospects they have of supporting a secular government.
Suppose Congress decides that they will not support the third front under any conditions, and that they instead turn around and
discuss all this afterwards. We can't right now work out all the possible scenarios.
So the message that the people of India will get is that the man who in many ways could be the kingmaker on May the 16th, and that's less than a week away, is actually playing with the dice in such a way that we could go straight from one election to another with uncertainty and instability.
I don't think politics works out that way. We could be a spectator, not the kingmaker.
Okay, so what you're then saying to me is that your hopes of stability vest, A, in your belief that the left parties as a whole will not do much worse than last time, you'll get around 50-55, which many people question and doubt, and that the third front will end up as number one, which also many people doubt. So people say that if he's not playing with instability, then he's building castles in the air.
There's no question of instability. There will be a government, and as I said earlier, time and again, if we cannot get the type of government we want, we will be in the opposition.
All right, let's take a break at that point. Let's come back and talk to you about the major challenges that India faces. First, I want to talk to you about the economic challenge, which touches everyone in their lives, and ask you how you see it and what you think needs to be done about it. That's in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate in a special two-part interview with the man who could be kingmaker on May the 16th, the General Secretary of the Communist Party Marxist, Prakash Karat. Mr. Karat, let's talk about the challenge of the economic crisis India faces. As you look at the economy, just days before you might actually be in a position of having to handle it, do you see green shoots of recovery, or do you see an unmitigated continuing economic crisis?
I think the government has underestimated the adverse impact of the global economic crisis. They started off by saying that our fundamentals are strong, and then came the gradual realization that things are not so good. And I think that for a pretty long time, we will be faced with serious problems in our economy.
I want very much to talk about how we tackle these serious problems, but first, for a moment, let's try and see by what extent the government has underestimated things. The government claims that in 2009-2010, the economy could grow between 6 and 6.5%. The World Bank and IMF slashed that figure down to about 4%. Oxford Economics comes in even lower at 3.2. What sort of growth do you think is possible?
I think that the government is again underestimating the crisis, so the growth will be lower. And more dangerous is the fact that they're not recognizing the serious loss of jobs in the country. I think in the last 6 months we have lost over 20 lakh jobs or 25 lakh jobs, and they're not talking about it also.
Would you say therefore that the unemployment aspect of this crisis is in fact the worst and the most serious one?
No, that's in terms of the human cost immediately, it is the job loss. But I think more serious is the fact that the government's fiscal stimulus package and all the measures that they are taking have been far too inadequate. You see, among the G20 countries, we are the 4th lowest in terms of the fiscal stimulus that we have so far offered.
This is very interesting. You're actually arguing, therefore, for a greater fiscal stimulus, a greater boost to get demand going, and yet people point out that already the overall stimulus of the central government alone could have increased beyond 8%, heading towards 9%, and if you add in the 3.5% of the states, we're coming in perilously close to 12%.
No, I think what we should focus on is not the deficit. We should focus on increasing public expenditure. You have to pump in money into the economy, and the government has to do that. And that will create demand, it will protect jobs, and it will create new jobs.
So what you're saying is that you need to put in more money and don't worry about the fact that a consequence of this is rising fiscal deficit.
They're going about the wrong way. They are trying to see that cheap credit is available, interest rates are lowered, but the real thing is you need to put money in people's pockets. Purchasing power has to increase.
So let me sum up what you're saying, that is, you're saying that the government is tackling the problem from the wrong end. It's trying to make money cheaper, it's trying to expand the flow of money, but the problem is no one wants to take money. What they should be doing is putting money in people's pockets so they spend and create demand.
Exactly.
But how? How do they put money in people's pockets?
You see, in this fiscal package, they gave 20,000 crores increased planned expenditure, which is nothing. It's 0.5% of the GDP. So you should spend more. The government should not worry about the Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act and all that, and they have to pump in money.
So in other words, if you were to be on the 16th of May in a position of determining the response to the economic crisis, how high would you let the fiscal deficit go? It's already teetering around 8-9. Would you push it beyond 10?
Yes, definitely beyond 10.
Beyond 10?
Yes.
How much higher?
That we'll have to see. I can't tell you off the cuff, because what I'm saying is you can go for increase in expenditure, planned expenditure, much more.
Okay, let me put you a possible problem. Your main concern as you boost up the fiscal deficit and as you ensure that money gets into the hands and pockets of ordinary people is to create demand so that they spend. The problem is that your manifesto commits you to what many would consider draconian tax measures, which will actually retard recovery because it will frighten investors and frighten entrepreneurs. Aren't the two contradictory?
No, I don't think so. We are talking about taxes on very narrow spectrum of areas where you could have easily raised money, like the capital gains tax.
But you're also talking about increasing securities transaction tax, you're talking about increasing wealth tax, reintroducing
well, some of them are
inheritance tax.
long term. I'm saying in the immediate situation that we have, the FIIs have taken out money not because of any problems of taxation or problems within the country.
Can I put something to you? Clearly this manifesto was written without your being in power. If you were to come to power, you would notice the gravity of the situation. Already your conversation suggests that you have some idea of how grave things are. Could you therefore, when you look at the gravity of the situation,
yes,
push the fiscal deficit first, increase the spending and therefore increase demand, and say we'll consciously hold back on the tax increases for a while?
We have in our manifesto put a section on immediate measures to be taken to meet the economic crisis. And we also pointed out that's a longer term argument that our financial sector has been relatively protected, not thanks to Dr. Manmohan Singh and Mr. P. Chidambaram, because the left would not allow them to completely liberalize and open up the financial sector.
But that in a sense is an old story. The challenge you'll face if you come to power is to get the economy moving again. And
yes,
in that wider interest, could you say that, look, we'll hold back the tax increases that we are committed to in our manifesto, not implement them immediately, wait a year and a half, let's get the economy moving with boosting the fiscal deficit and therefore creating
We will
money.
increase public investment and public expenditure,
hold
but
back
there
tax
are
for a while.
areas, certain areas, we will not, for example, participatory notes, you see.
That you'll stop it once.
We will stop it.
Let me put this to you. One of the great fears people have of the left parties, and perhaps this is true of the CPM in particular, is that when you come anywhere near power, they get frightened about what this will do to the economy, what it will do to growth, what it will do to their capacity or their requirement to pay tax.
No,
People are frightened of it. What can you say to
the
reassure
record
them?
of the left-led governments in West Bengal and Kerala makes it clear that they have nothing to worry about or to be unreasonably afraid of.
You're saying something very interesting. Are you saying to the audience listening to you that judge us by Buddhadev Bhattacharya's track record in Bengal rather than by the rhetoric you hear from Delhi?
No, in fact we are having a discussion about West Bengal that their tax realization is very low, you see, compared to many other states, and they must increase the tax revenues.
So in other words, Buddhadev Bhattacharya is going to be kicking up taxes.
No,
and far from being a smiling face, he'll become a frightening face.
Not the type of taxes which are there levied by the center.
But the message then, although you're smiling as you put it, is that the rhetoric in Delhi will triumph over Buddhadev Bhattacharya's track record and taxes will go up.
We are talking about states having sound finances, raising resources. We are discussing this matter even in West Bengal.
Let me put it like this. Are you confident that you actually have the experience and the capacity to handle what must be the worst economic crisis? Or will it be a case of novices coming in and failing?
No, I think the combination that we have, the third front, has very experienced people in government. Most of them have been long-standing chief ministers.
Has the third front actually sat together and worked out how to tackle this crisis?
We have started looking at all the manifestos. I find that very interesting because a lot of common things are there in all these parties.
So only now are you putting together a coherent strategy? You haven't done it up to now.
We have to work on it after the elections. That's how it's done. The United Front Common Program came after the election.
All right, it's a slight small case of fingers crossed. Let's take a break at that point. Tomorrow I want to talk to you about the major foreign policy challenges India faces. That's tomorrow night on CNBC TV 18 at 10:30. But for tonight, goodbye.